Hello my friend, my name is Anton from Conan.com and we continue our Code Express video series. Today the 9th episode and we will speak about the new type of the loop which is called while loop. So while is a loop which composes together the way how the conditional if works and how the loop for works. Basically the while loops allows you to continue doing some certain actions which you don't know in advance how many times you would like to do. For instance, when you need to list the IP addresses out of the ranges, you don't know in advance how many iterations you need to do across the list because you don't know how your list is big. Or when are you doing the certain API request, like REST API request, SOAP XML request to your destination, you don't know how many requests you might need to do just because there might be amount of information that you are getting in the one request is limited, or there might be a lot of information in general and you would need to do multiple requests. If you're familiar with Django framework, that allows you to split the whole data that you are getting from a certain endpoint into a multiple pieces. So while is useful where you need to run the certain actions multiple amount of time, not knowing in advance how many times you would like to run the sections. Our case for today that we will cover is the way of splitting the range of providing IP addresses into single IP addresses, so that you would like to do a discovery or some other stuff, you would have a single IP addresses that you can use. As always, we start with our VM where we have all our Python codes, and if you would like to recap something from the previous session, you could easily take a look on your on our web page on the GitHub where contains all the session on our video channel where actually you would like where you could see all our videos. So I have prepared the file in order to avoid wasting the time like usually finding a way with the Python 3.8 you could, and the Python 3, the version that we are covering in our series. So we could get started directly to the point. So what we'll start with, we'll create a range of the IP addresses in a variable, and then we will work with our code to show you how we could use while loop to list all the IP addresses in a certain range. So we start with the creating of the variable. We'll call it IP addresses, let's say, and this is a string, so we'll provide the range of IP addresses, say 10.0.0.3 up to 10.0.1.15, let's say. So you see, we don't provide any prefix or subnet. We just say that is our starting IP address, that is our ending IP address. Let's generate the list of the IP addresses within this range. But the first thing that we would need to do, we need to split using the split function. If you don't know how the split function is working, take a look on the corresponding video. And here we use the split function in order to take the first and the second IP address out of this range. So we do it as into the variables IP start, comma IP end, and we provide the name of our variables IP addresses. We apply the split function to it, and the split function we take the dash as the separator. So now we could print these two parts of our two created variables. So we have created in a separate window. We would just be running this test while script. And you see that we are getting the two. Oh, I think I did some mistakes. So I need to provide IP start and IP end. So the split function, as you remember, we have discussed this previously in our video series, allows you to split the original string variables or whatever variables into multiple elements, and the output of the split function is a list. So we know that in this case we have two elements. That's why what we could do, we could assign two separate variables, in this case IP start and IP end, and we add the elements consequently for the first element out of the list, so with index 0, and the second element with the index 1 to these variables. So the variables are here. The next step, what we would need to do, we would like to convert because this is a string, right? And in order to list IP addresses, we need by some mean convert them into a number. Typically, if you're familiar with IP addresses, this is binary numbers, but we could still hold them in the decimal format, and we just need to do some math around by converting this string in the string format into the decimal. So going from dotted decimal to standard decimal, just a single big number. So how we could do this? The first step, what we are going to do, we will convert each of these elements into a list, again using the split function, so that we could create so that we could define each and every octet as a separate number, and we would need to deal with each separate number on the octet, and they apply the appropriate binary mask behind. So what we do further, so we create two variables. So the first one, we will change the way how our IP start and IP end consequences of the array works. So how the variable looks like from a string to array, and we do it as IP start. So we will just use the same variable name, equal the IP start, IP underscore start dash split, and in this case we provide as a separator dot. So we'd like to have each and every element, so each and every octet as a separate entry in our list. Then we would need to get the amount of the indexes. So the amount of the indexes are, in our case, or number of the elements in this list. So we know it would be 4, but just to show that the sum functions that additionally some are useful when we work with the list. So we would say that index would be equal to the outcome of the function len, that function that gives us the number of the element out of certain list. We provide the list here, and we would decrease it by 1 because, as you know, we have covered previously in our video series, the list starts with the index 0, and it's coming 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. When we can count the amount of the element, it provides us the number. And despite the indexes would be from 0 to 3, the amount of the elements would be 4. And we would use the index as the counter going just from other, let's say, side of our list to calculate the proper mass behind creating the single integer number out of this dotted decimal format. So we have created this index using the len function. The next, we would create num IPS variable, which would be an integer holding the final decimal number associated with a certain IP address. So, and here finally the while loop comes onto the scene. So while loop is working in the way that we provide the while as a keyword, then we need to provide a condition, and the action associated within this while would be executed multiple times until the condition, or while the condition is true. Once the condition is getting false, you getting out of this loop. So, and in this case, the element that we would be tracking would be the index. We'll start from the index from the right have sign. So I mean from the ending of the array and going to the beginning, so to the element with the index 0, and that's why our condition would be index should be more or equal than 0. So we start using this line with a 3 effectively, and we will be going 3, 2, 1, 0. In order to implement this, so we will add action that is, don't forget to indent actually by 4 spaces once everything that we have inside the while. And we add here that we would be decreasing the index by 1. So have this construction dash or minus in this case equal sign, and then on the right hand side some number means that the original value of the element would be decreased, or if you would add instead of dash, if you would add the plus, then it will be increased by the amount what are happening on the right hand side. So what we're doing now, basically we have just created the way that our loop is not infinite, and within the loop we would be increasing the value of our element number IPS, so meaning number, some integer that would be associated or that would be represented in decimal format IP address. So we would be increasing the number of the original element. That's why I would use the same construction plus equal. And what we need to do, so we need to, going from the right hand side to the left hand side, take what we have as an element value. So that's why we would be taking the IP start element with the index inside. So, but this is, once we have split it using split function, it is a string. So we need to convert this value into integer. That's why we use a function integer. So that would make sure if it is possible to convert the certain string into an integer, it would create it as an integer. So we would convert, let's say, 15 as a string element into the integer 15, and with integer we could do the math operations. So we then multiply this element by, so now I start speaking about the binary mass. So we know that each octet is 256, I mean into the decimal format, and that's why we need to multiply each and every octet by 256 and to appropriate power. So the power for the last octet is 0, the power for the first octet, for the second octet is 1, for the third octet is 2, for the third octet, for the last one, I mean, is 3. So, and that is why we again using our index number. So we start calculating the power of 256. So creating 256, to provide the power, we need to use the double asterisk element. So just let's add some space here. And we set the power of 256 as our length of the, or number of our octets in general. So we know that we start is 3, decreased by the index. So it means that for the first iteration, len IP address -1 would be 3, and the index in the beginning would be also 3. So the power of, when the element to the power of 0, it means 1. This is a mass. So that's why for the first octet, it wouldn't be multiplied by 256, because 256 to the power of 0 is 1. For the second iteration, it will be 256 itself. For the third iteration, it will be 256 multiplied to the power of 2, so multiplied by 256, and that's it. So then we would like to print what we have generated, and let's do it in the way that print, then we take that the IP, then we would provide the IP address equals to integer, and we would provide the value of the integer. We provide the format. So to provide the proper IP address, we would use a join function. If you forget about the German function or join function, take a look on the appropriate video. We had it previously in our Code Express series. So we create back out of our IP start out of our list. We create a single string and using dot as a separator between the elements. And the second element would be our num IP string. So that's our code. Let's execute. Should be working, I hope. And that's where we are. So we create the code that has converted according to the appropriate mass rules the IP address in the dotted decimal format, which is initially in the Python as a string, and to an integer. So now we need to copy this code and do the same operation for the second IP address. And that is where I just creating the basis for further conversion of the IP address in the string, in the dot decimal to integer, and to provide the listing. So we'll take the same approach. So we'll create a conversion of our IP end list. So using the IP end string, so we take the same stuff. So we would call the IPE. So we're basically just changing their elements, but the mass doesn't change. So you see that it is very similar thing. So why we need to do it? We have to put template, and we can. And that this will be the topic for our next session, where we'll be speaking about the user-defined functions. So it will be a lot of fun for you. And I think the session might be complex, but very interesting. So, and for now, we are just creating we're just copying the same code. And I hope we have split or replaced everything, and we have generated now the basis for our mass. So let's try it, if it's working properly, I hope. So we're getting converted each and every IP address to the integer. So now what our code should do further, so we need just to list all the integers in this interval, so from starting till the end, and to convert it back to the proper IP address in the dotted decimal format. So how we do it? First of all, we will implement using the if conditional. If you would like to know more about if conditional, refer to the previous session where we have covered if function, sorry, if conditional into very great details with a lot of examples. So we will check if their starting IP address is less or equal than ending IP address. Then we would say where, don't forget to do the, oh sorry, I forgot to add the column, don't forget to add the column, syntax is very important. So we would be doing something as a listing IP addresses for the range. Otherwise, so basically, if we intentionally or not intentionally provided starting IP address in the range is bigger than the last one, we'll print that the starting IP is bigger than the last one. Check your IP range. So now what are we going to do? Let's execute our script once more. So we start that we are getting this IP address for the range. We need to provide what are the range. So let's say they are using the format string. That IP address we'd like to list is our original range IP addresses. We actually don't just need to have a string here. We don't need to have anything more. Therefore, we provide as a format input here. We actually could delete these parts, so we don't need them anymore. So, and let's execute script one more time. So we see that we would like to listen the IP addresses for the range. Let's do a mistake and add the IP address, let's say here as 2. So it's clear that the starting IP address now is bigger than the last one, and it should not be the case for the script to work in, and that's why if we execute the script one more. Oh, so I see that we are doing some sort of mistake somewhere. So we're saying that IP starting IP address. Yes, I did the wrong condition. So obviously we are checking the starting with the ending. Now, if we execute our script, we're getting the starting IP address is bigger than the last one. Check your API range, which is correct. So let's correct our range back, and we would kick off with actually looking how we create the function that listing the IP address itself. So now what we need to do, the idea behind the script that we are going to create further, again, it will rely on the while function, actually on the multiple nested while function. And you see that in these cases, because we don't know how many IP addresses we have, right? So, or we could calculate it actually, the amount, and then using the for function, but it's not always the case that it is easy to do. And in this case, we will use a while function going just and checking the IP addresses from one range to another. So what we'll do then internally, we'll create a variable. We will call it as let's say it's number IP temp. It would be 0. Sorry, it would not be 0. It would be our starting IP address. So we'd be gradually working with this element, so we wouldn't touch the original one. And we'll be doing this script while our temporary IP address is less or equal than our ending IP address. So that's what we are going to do. And in order to get somehow out of this script, what we will do, we will make sure that our number IP is increased by 1 during the whole cycle. So launching this script right now will provide us the list. Oh, so yeah, so it is called num, not a num, so my typo. So once we run our script right now, we need to print these IP addresses. And let's do this. So, and now we are getting the list. So this is in the decimal format, the IP addresses, right? So, and you see they're increasing by 1 for each and every iteration. So the last thing that we need to do is to convert this to dotted decimal format. So how we can do this? Basically, once we were doing the increasing of our element and multiplying it by the number of 256 to the certain power, we'll need right now to do the backward operation. So what we need to do, we need to take this original big integer value and divide it. For certain parts, we need to take the rest of the division. For the certain part, we will need to take the proper elements, the whole part from, so not the rest part, but other part of the division, and this would be actually our number. So how we do this? So we'll create then within our while loop the elements, so we might remove this. So we'll create a temporary array, because we would need to collect back our elements, the integers with a part of our IP addresses, again per octet, and we would then run, so we will create a list. We'll create temp IP. This is a list. So within this list, or before we start the list, in each and every operation, we need to take this IP address that we have as an integer and divide it till the size when our element is still less, or otherwise it is more than 0. That's why I'll create a temporary variable. We call it decr, so it stands for decrement. We'll assign to it the value of our temporary variable, and we create a new while loop, nested while loop, which we would like to run until the decrement is more than 0. Within this loop, what we are going to do, we will make sure that, first of all, we will print, not to add in it yet to our list, the element of our IP address per octet. So we take it as a decrement divided by, in this case, we again need to, we are doing the division, we need to split it we need to divide it, sorry, by 256 to the power of the octet index. So that's why we need to create here additional element index starting from 3 and going downwards. So we would print our part of the IP address would be this decrement to big integer divided by 256 to the power of 3 minus index. So why is 3 minus index? So we could here simplify. So we know that our IP address consists of 4 octets, and the top is 3, the last one is 0. So we will print this function, and as the outcome, the decrement value would be changed to the rest out of the division. So to take the rest of the division, we take this specific element called percent. So this returns us to the rest of the division, and the rest of the division would be of the same division what we was just doing just right now. So decrement is changed each and every time, and until we get into the 0. So once we get into the 0, we don't have anything else. And we need also to make sure, as we are relying on the index, we need to make sure our index is decremented either. So you see right now I have a lot of math in this action today, which we didn't have previously, but the math is very common for the programming, and especially for the network automation, we need to work with IP addresses, MAC addresses, ranges, and so on. So let's execute our script right now. We're getting some errors. I wonder why we're getting these errors. We should have done something not correct. So perhaps we have somewhere typo. So let's modify our script here. So, and hope it will be now correct. However, it might be some error, so then we need to dig into further. So let's take a look. No, we're still invalid syntax, so it tells us that we cannot use this. That is very strange. What if we just use like index -1? I think it should be working, but oh yes, I got the what I did wrong. Sorry, I didn't close one of the brackets here, so I need to close the round brackets. So now the syntax will be correct, and we're getting right now, oh, we're getting some strange stuff. So where we have our code here, let's take a look. So we are getting the dotted decimal format, which is definitely should not be the case. Let's analyze what we are to do. So we need to take a look back to our code, and we need to find where we did a big mistake. And the mistake is that the logic that we need to define is a bit reversed. So in this case, we need to start dividing, as we are starting from the biggest number to the lowest one, we need to start dividing by the biggest amount of index. So that's why we need to start not with the 256 into the 3 minus 3 meaning 0 and equal 1, but other way around from other side. So that's why we put the original index to the 0, and then we, instead of decreasing, we would be increasing it by 1. So if we execute our script right now, we are getting the IP addresses in almost perfect format. You see that we're getting 10, then 0, then 1.15. So what we need to do right now, so we need to round this element, right? And to round this element, we just need to use the basic math function. There are multiple ways, but what we need to do, we just need to cut the rest of the division, so and have only to the whole part. So we do it as using the function int. So we'd like to take the integer part. We don't need everything after the floating dot. And if we execute right now our script, you see that we start getting the proper IP addresses, yet printed separately. And we, instead of printing it in this format, we will do the following. So we will, using the append function of the list. If you'd like to learn more about it, just read on our blog post or the Code Express, or read in the video series about the working with the list. So we will append, using the append function, we'd add the elements to our list, and we would, after this is complete, so after the whole list is created within our script, our while nested loop, we will print the following string IP is, providing the IP address. Now we would use the same join function, but the join function, as you remember, or if you know, that it's applicable only to the string. So that's why we need to complete the integer back to the string to create the IP address. And we do this as within the format function to provide the input. We would use the join function. So we would use dot as a separator. Input to the join function would be there. Let me think how we could do this properly. We need to provide our temp IP address. I think if you just provide, yeah, we need to provide their IP addresses in this string format. So we'd like to provide temp IP. And that's why we'll be not only applying here the integer, but also the string function to convert the integer value of the element into the string. And the construction looks very heavy, but it should be working. Let's execute it one more. So I must have done some mistakes somewhere. I think I didn't put enough brackets. And if we utilize our script right now, you see that we're getting all the IP addresses. So if you carefully analyze, we start with the first IP address. So in our range is 3, and the last IP address is 1.15. And you see that we are getting IP by IP, all the IP addresses that we'd like to have in this range. So, and that's it. That's the script, which lists using multiple times while and multiple mass operations, such as multiplying or to the power of something, or division on the rest of the division, allows you to deal with the IP mass and provides you the necessary foundation to create your script for network automation when you need to do amount of actions multiple times, but you don't need to know how many times. Thank you very much for watching. Like if you like this video, and to put in the proper sign in the YouTube channel, repost it, share with your friends, colleagues, and thank you very much for watching. See you the next time.